In my story part 5, I will be doing something quite unique. I will be covering very specific things in a very short period of time. You will notice that I'm speaking a lot faster. The reason why I didn't speak fast before is because in 2012 I developed Bell's palsy. So you can see the one side of my face is affected very much like someone that's had a stroke. I had a 70% recovery, but it's still difficult for me to speak fast in many instances and not literally spit at the camera. So I'm sorry about that, but I need to cover a lot as well in this time, and I only have about 15 minutes on my phone. And I need to do this upload from my phone because the moment I download it to the PC, it can take 6 to 7 hours to just upload the video to YouTube. So to get started, I actually gave myself cues on my computer screen so that I'll be able to guide myself through this because I won't be able to make any breaks in this recording. So what I want to do today is speak about my time after my military service at the Test Flight and Development Center in Bredasdorp. And if you haven't watched the other videos yet, I recommend now that you stop and you go back and you look at my introduction as well as part 1, 2, 3 and 4 of this My Story video series to actually understand where I'm going with this. Because in my opinion, in the middle now, I'm making probably the most important video of them all, because I want everything to come back to this lockdown that we're experiencing at the moment, and I want us to come back to the situation we find ourselves in within South Africa and within the world. And what I'll be discussing today is my subsequent career in nuclear at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station, and I want to discuss how that relates to government. I want to speak about oversight at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station. I want to speak about oversight in government, qualifications and testing. Then I want to speak about errors and self-rectification. And then after that, I want to speak about the party or the gang system, as I call it, that we have within government, and then a proposed new system. And I think that's quite a lot to cover within 15 minutes, so I better get started. It's important for you to understand at this stage that my career path, I did not decide. My mother saw an advert in a newspaper and said, you're going to apply for that. When I finished my military service, I applied basically for 2 jobs. The one was at the post office. I went for testing at the waterfront, I still remember, in a conference center. There were many of us. After I had completed the testing, I got feedback, and they said that we don't think that this is a job for you. And that was a job as a technologist. And they said that I will probably get bored and end up leaving. So when this opportunity presented itself for me to apply for a nuclear cadet program at Koeberg, which was a pilot program, I obliged. My mother wanted me out of the house and independent. So I applied at the end of 1991, went for extensive testing at the Eskom buildings in Bellville. And in December, I got a phone call to say, do you want the job offer? And I obviously took the offer and started on the 1st of January in 1992 at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station. And this cadet program was a year-long program. We weren't permanently employed. We received 1,075 Rand a month, which was basically enough to cover food and board and lodging and a few extra cents to drive around. But during this cadet program, we were exposed to everything at Koeberg, and the main focus was to actually produce or test people to see if they would be good enough to enter the operations department at Koeberg, which was struggling at the time to get enough staff, South African staff, that they could train up to become licensed reactor operators. Out of the 18 people that were selected for this program, out of 752 that applied, I was one of 2 people that received permanent employment at the end of the program. They were so strict that they would literally, in the middle of us writing an exam, security will just rock up and take someone by the arm, tell him to pack his bags, and they'll march him off site. So while we were being tested during this program, we had to give monthly reports on the different departments we spent time in. We had to do continuous exams where they tested us. It was a testing ground. It's like going to the army and doing your basic training, and you either pass it or you don't. And it was very difficult to be working so closely with 18 other people and seeing them being taken away one by one, and very unceremoniously, I might add. I don't think things like that will be allowed at Koeberg today, but it certainly did back then. And I saw the entire transition at Koeberg from pre-1994 to post-1994. And it was interesting to see the influence that politics actually had in the nuclear landscape. And the one thing I have to explain to you about Koeberg is that there is a nuclear culture, a nuclear safety culture that you have to abide by, and that everyone gets used to. It becomes a part of life. And it is certainly something that the government can learn a lot from. And it's very important to understand that that culture is overseen by the National Nuclear Regulator, or is supposed to be overseen by the National Nuclear Regulator. In other words, there's an independent body appointed by government that actually oversees the activities at Koeberg and makes sure that Koeberg complies with all the best international standards and practices and abides by its license agreements. So there's one big license agreement, which is called NL001, that Koeberg has to abide by. So it sets out all the rules for operation, and it's important to understand that that is similar to our constitution for the government. In other words, there's one overarching document that says this is how you need to operate, and you have to stick within that. If you don't stick within that, then you will be held accountable, and the NNR can actually tell Koeberg to shut both the units, the reactor units down, and close down the plant if they wanted to. So they have a lot of authority. I have about 9 minutes left, so I have a lot to get through. So the first thing I want to explain is, or I have been explaining, is oversight at Koeberg. The fact that there's a regulator that actually looks at the activities at Koeberg, and they make sure that we actually do things according to specific international standards. As part of that oversight, Koeberg has voluntarily joined WANO and IMPO, okay, a World Association for Nuclear Operators, and the International Nuclear Plant Operators Oversight Body, which basically sets standards for the world. And if you belong to those organizations, which Koeberg does, then you need to strive to be in the top nuclear power stations in the world. And Koeberg actually has IMPO accreditation for its operations training to say that they actually train their operators at a certain level or higher standard. And Koeberg is the only nuclear power station outside of the US that actually holds IMPO accreditation for its operator license training program and non-license training program, which is a very significant thing. Now, you would wonder, what has this got to do with government? Now, if you look at oversight for government, who oversees what government does? Us, the public. And how good are we at doing our jobs? When do we actually get involved to actually oversee the functions or duties of government? And the answer is every 5 years, when we have local government or when we have national elections. That is the only input that we're given and actively use currently to hold government accountable. There are many other ways of doing that. There's a public protector, there's the court or the legal system, but there's no other organizations or other countries' governments or public groups that go into government, look at what they're doing and say, but listen, we think you're doing this wrong, or you're not doing this according to the Constitution. This simply does not exist the way that it should. And this brings me to the very next thing, which is qualifications and testing. Now at Koeberg, after 11 years at Koeberg, I received my license to run the nuclear reactors. So I was selected to go on the license operators course, and I did a 3-year course where I got my license, which is right here behind me. And you will see my number was KRO145. So I had to go through all the testing required for me to be able to operate as a licensed reactor operator. Now, if you look at our current government, The requirements you have to actually be an elected official is very little. There are no requirements besides the fact that you should not have been in jail up to a certain amount of time before your election. So anyone can literally become any level of office bearer in our current system that we have within the country. And this, in my opinion, is a huge problem. So how were we tested at Koeberg? When I completed my initial testing for this nuclear cadet program, we had to go for further testing. In fact, there was 2 full days of testing at Koeberg where we did psychometric tests and IQ tests. And based on those results, they then decided to select 18 people. And I remember the people that did pass the initial test, and there were a few hundred of them that actually had to go through the further testing at Koeberg. And subsequently to that, I did many tests, especially psychometric testing, to get me to the point where I could actually become a reactor operator. And I actually was one of the people that did the first Vienna test. And this is a test that was developed in Vienna, and where they test your skills and abilities to be able to manipulate controls and actually look at many inputs at the same time and then act upon them accurately. And all licensed operators at Koeberg have gone through that testing now. It became a standard when I initially did that test. Now, in government at the moment, you need no qualifications and there is no testing done. None whatsoever.